and to all distinguished participants, panelists, and guests who have been able to join us today. Good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, depending on wherever you are, and feel most welcome to our webinar that is entitled Intergenerational Dialogue, Africa's Trends on Democracy. I'm particularly delighted to see such a diverse and esteemed gathering joining us today from various corners of the continent and from the globe, as it were. My name is Willis Onyango, and I serve as the Executive Director at the Youth Cafe. And I'm honored today to serve as your host for this important dialogue. Allow me specifically to extend a warm welcome to our panelists and esteemed speakers and all participants who have joined us today so that we can delve into the Africa's democratic journey. Today's webinar comes at a crucial juncture following the recent Summit for Democracy in Seoul, the Republic of South Korea, which I believe some of the speakers and panelists would have time to expound on, where the spotlight, particularly on Africa's democratic landscape, was really intensified. Against the backdrop of findings from many research institutions, including notably the recent Economist Intelligent Unit Democracy Index, which serves as a reminder of the imperative to strengthen democratic institutions and counter authoritarian tendency that has become increasingly urgent. In the region and most part of Africa, with its diverse political tapestry, it is at the forefront of a global discussion. We have seen recent coup d'etats. We have seen elections that do not meet the threshold of being fair and democratic. And therefore, with pivotal elections taking place in various countries across the continent, some are upcoming, there's need to scrutinize Africa's democratic trajectory that has never become more pressing. This dialogue, therefore, aims to provide a platform for analysis, reflection of Africa's democratic trends in light of also global developments. By examining insights from Democracy Index, for example, and reflecting on the outcomes of the just concluded Summit for Democracy, we think would be seeking a journey. Throughout our discussion today, we will explore regional perspectives, and as you have already noted, that we have representation from East, West, North, and Southern Africa, with the objective of identifying key challenges and opportunities where all of us can plug in, as well as discuss strategies for strengthening our governance systems and promoting accountability and transparency. But apart from that, we will highlight the critical role that young people and youth engagement, as well as that of the civil society, has in advancing democracy and human rights across the continent. I encourage all participants to actively engage in the discussions, share their insights, and contribute to a collective dialogue. And together, let us explore pathways for advancing democracy in Africa and empowering the future generation to shape a more inclusive and equitable society. Once again, I extend my warmest welcome to each and every one of you, and thank you for joining us, and I sincerely wish you a fruitful and enriching dialogue and webinar experience. Thank you.
Thank you, Willis, for that analysis of the state of Africa's democracy currently, and thank you for also just welcoming us. I think it's a nice start to completely just dive into the conversation. For those who perhaps are not aware, the webinar is structured into, it's divided into two. Section 1 will cover regional perspectives on democracy in Africa, and Section 2 will cover strategies for strengthening democratic institutions, that is. So in Section 1, we have 3 panelists with us. That is Eglina Mpanga. She is a junior expert at COMESA, specializing in governance, peace, and security issues. With a bachelor's degree in environmental education from the University of Zambia, she brings a diverse skill set to her role. Eglina is committed to advancing democracy and human rights in Africa, which is evident through her certification in youth peace and security from the United Nations Systems Staff College. In her capacity, Eglina champions COMESA's efforts in promoting good governance and peace in the region, making significant contributions to building a more sustainable and peaceful Africa. Just so that everyone gets to know who you are, maybe Eglina, you can just say hi.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Awesome. Also in this session, in this particular section, we'll also have Noher El Mamoun. Mamoun. I hope I said your name correctly. She's a prominent figure in Africa youth leadership, serving as the vice chairman of the COMESA Youth Advisory Panel. Her advocacy work focuses on shaping inclusive policies and initiatives that empower young people across the COMESA region. As an academic instructor, she fosters a culture of learning and knowledge sharing, empowering individuals to excel in their academic and professional endeavors. She's also deeply committed to sustainable development and gender equality, leading initiatives to promote environmental stewardship and women's empowerment. Through her leadership roles and advocacy efforts, she exemplifies the transformative power of youth empowerment and sustainable development in Africa. Noher, perhaps you can say hi so that people get to know who you are.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Awesome. And lastly, we'd have God bless Chibure. Someone was asking, there's someone here who called God bless. Yes, there was. He brings over a decade of experience in social engagement, community organizing, and youth development in his role as the global president of Ready to Lead Africa. With a background in political science and public administration, he has worked extensively with multinational organizations and governments to address various socioeconomic challenges. He's a Mandela Washington Fellow and a Global Advisory Board member at the Presidential Precinct in Virginia, USA. His initiatives, such as the Follow the Results and Follow the Promises tech platforms, demonstrate his commitment to enhancing civic engagement and accountability across Africa. And through his advocacy and grassroots mobilization, he has played a significant role in advancing democratic processes and youth inclusion in governance, making him a key figure in Africa's development landscape. God bless. People would like to know if there's someone here called. Maybe you can also say hi so people get to know you more.
Yeah, hello everybody. It's good to be here, and I just look forward to learning and sharing with everybody. Thank you.
Awesome. Okay. I will start with Noher. We had a couple of questions for you, so maybe we can just start with you, right? How can African countries collaborate regionally to address common challenges and promote democratic values, particularly from the perspective of youth leadership?
Okay. Firstly, I'm so glad to be here and to be a panelist in this effective session and to share ideas and experiences among the African continent from different countries and different perspectives. About your question, they collaborate regionally to address common challenges, can involve in several strategies, especially in leveraging youth leadership. I can point it like a points, and we can discuss it. Firstly, these strategies can be like youth exchange programs, regional youth forums, youth-led initiatives, and the digital platforms, especially right now at the era of artificial intelligence and social media networks and so on. Moreover, the capacity building throughout trainings and sharing experiences. Moving to the partnership with civil society, especially the NGOs in each country, and the regional one, moving to the international level. Maybe at least engagement with the government institutions. These are the points that can be like a strategist. We can work in to leverage youth leadership. About the youth exchange programs, we can establish some exchange programs which allow young leaders from different countries, from different African countries especially, to interact, to share experiences, to learn from each other. These can foster understanding and collaboration. And I can give an example for an program like this, which I'm graduated from, which called APLP, African Presidential Leadership Program. It's an African program held in Egypt. Collect the participants from the African countries all over the continent, giving them promoting their personal skills like negotiation, like leadership, communication, and so on. Moving to the regional youth forums, we can organize forums or conferences where youth leaders from across the region can discuss common challenges, can exchange ideas, and develop mutual and joint initiatives, can be effective in promoting this collaboration. The youth-led initiative, supporting and funding, and here is a key word, which is funding, which we are here, all of us find it as an obstacle to find a fund for the youth activity, especially in the African countries. The funding of this youth-led initiative, which focused on democratic values, human rights, and good governance, can empower young leaders to drive change within their communities and across borders. About the digital platforms, we can create online platforms or social networks, especially for, and here is, I have to stress on, especially for the African youth leaders, to connect and collaborate and share resources, which can facilitate the communication and coordination. About the fifth point, I said about the capacity building. The capacity building can be by providing the training and capacity building programs for young leaders in the areas, as I said, like leadership, negotiation, conflict resolution, and advocacy. All these can equip them with the skills necessary to effectively address common challenges and promote the democratic values. Moving to the partnership with the civil society, I think it's very important to collaborate with the civil society organizations that focus on youth empowerment and democracy promotion, which can amplify efforts and reach a wider audience. About the last point I said, about the engagement with government institutions, advocating for increased youth representation and participation in government institutions and decision-making, especially process, can ensure that these youth voices are heard and taken into account by shaping policies and strategies at the regional level. I think these are my examples and points for leveraging the energy and creativity and passion of young leaders, and African country can collaborate regionally to address common challenges, as you said in your question, and advance democratic values across the continent. Thank you.
I think you are muted. Please unmute yourself.
Sorry about that. Sorry about that. Yes, I was saying, Noha, I think you pretty much touched base on how the youth can actually promote democratic values just purely from their perspective. Following up on that, God bless. What are some successful democratic initiatives or challenges faced by countries in sub-Saharan African or the North Africa? How can they leverage technology and civic engagement platforms to contribute to addressing challenges?
All right, thank you so much for the question. And so when I'm asked to speak about African democracy, lately I have been a bit more direct and circumspect, especially with the idea that democracy, the word itself, and the idea of how democracy works is an educated collective that understands the importance of freedom, of participation, and accountability. And at the center of that whole conversation is the concept of opposition. Opposition helps us to demand accountability so that man does not, revert to state of nature and takes, for granted collective resources and, collective freedom. So whilst we are discussing, African democracy, I just want to use this opportunity to share with my African brothers and sisters that I think we're beginning to see a trend where collectively in Africa, we are now saying, does the kind of democracy that we currently know and practice, is it working for us? Is it helping us achieve what democracy should actually be achieving for the continent? And that also impacts how we spread it across our different countries, how we spread it across West Africa, East Africa, North Africa, and Southern Africa. Because if we do not clearly get the concept design that we can embrace as just first human beings, our ability to even solve problems that arise from it becomes a lot more difficult. So I would like to speak from that angle at first. And now I think we're looking at the concept of Afro-democracy. The word itself is, how can Africa create a democratic system that is democratic, but takes into cognizance our unique realities and expectations, our background and our cultures and our history. A lot of this would inform how we solve problems, how we use technology to expand or improve on what we call democracy. One of the major things I've noticed working in the democratic space, having traveled to different continents around the world, is within the African social, linguistic lexicon and reality, the word opposition does not necessarily exist in the form that we now know it with regards to democracy. The word opposition in Africa, and if you check most of our languages, just do the etymological search for the meaning of opposition within the African continent or context, you realize that opposition is not actually for accountability. Opposition is to kill, is to destroy. That's what it means. So what you realize is we are incapable right now. I mean, maybe it's changing with our generation and the upcoming generation, is that when we hear the word opposition within the democratic space, we revert to the original text of what the word means psychologically. So rather than embrace the oppositional side of democracy, which helps us build accountability, encourage participation, encourage the growth of varied ideologies and positions, what we do is that we attack opposition, because the word opposition tells us that we need to destroy it because it is not for us. So we're having a problem with that, and it's very important to stress that out. I mean, I have worked on elections in Sierra Leone, Liberia, Ghana. Now we're following the elections in South Africa. And what you see is how political leaders treat power and how we deal with opposition. So even when we decided to go technological, which is the crux of your question, was that we still had opposition. The almost natural behavior of those in political office was to kill whatever ideas we had. Because again, opposition is not a term that promotes accountability within the African, context of itself. And I know that the former president of Nigeria, President Olusegun Obasanjo, is with us on this conversation, and we're trying to see how we can create something that takes into cognizance who we are, what we have become, what we want to become, and all of that. So part of what we've done, especially in Nigeria, I'll just speak to that very quickly, is we've now built technologies that help young people participate in the democratic process. We built something called Follow the Result. Follow the Result is a mobile app that is currently a mobile app on my phone. And what it does on election day is that it parallelly tabulates election results and sends it to a command center where Nigerians are able to view election results in real time. Because now we have access to collation centers where we're sending these results. And another thing we've done with technology is we built another technology. It's also a mobile app called Follow the Promises. Again, Follow the Promises was our response to the idea that democracy is beyond voting. Democracy is beyond advocacy. Democracy is about accountability. So the strategy we have now done, knowing that proximity can lead to attacks and what have you, we have now leveraged technology, and now we've empowered communities with mobile apps to track and report the progress of campaign promises made by candidates during elections. So now grassroots people have technologies and they're following government projects daily, and we have that again on our mobile app. And so for us, we understand the challenges. We're building technologies as solutions, but it is very important to highlight what the core challenge, especially in terms of culture, in terms of ideology, in terms of ideas, and how that affects African democracy generally. So yeah, thank you so much. And that's like some of the solutions that we have built. And right now we're building our AI platform that should be launched anytime from now, that will revolutionize our democracy within Nigeria and of course the West African and the entire African sub-region.
Actually, I'm not quite sure if because okay, yes, Africa is it's rich in diversity, and that of course extends in its democratic experiences. And yes, some countries have very high citizen partnership, while others, are facing challenges because of trust in institutions. And yeah, I think. Okay, I think you've answered my question, because then the next question would have been, yes, other than now using technology, how else have you also helped to help the citizens build trust with their institutions?
I mean, other than technology, how we've done it again to build trust on institutions is getting people involved. Very, very, very important. Expressing again, trust is not a one-sided variable. Trust is action, reaction, action, reaction, action, reaction, that then becomes consistent behavior. That is how you win trust. That is how you build trust. So if citizens gave up their rights based upon the social contract, which says that we all have rights as individuals, but we've all come together and we gave part of our rights to the government to act on our behalf. That is trust that the government that we have created will act in the best interest of the people. That is trust we have given. Now we are expecting a level of responsibility on the part of government. What we have seen largely in Africa is that the people that we have selected have not shown a lot of trust in replicating the good faith that we've given them. So what we've seen is that we've had bad roads that are not tarred. We've had corruption that has gone unabated. We've had tribalism that have sort of messed up our ability to be united, in one front. We've had poor educational facilities built across the continent as, posing as schools. We've had economic opportunities stifled by the political elites. That is creating an atmosphere of distrust. And this is actually one of the biggest problems. So when actors like us who are working in the civil society space run advocacy programs, or we talk to citizens and say, you know what, get involved in the process, do the work, do this, we are doing what I call the palliative response to development. You cannot develop a country or a community using palliative approaches to development. Palliative approaches to development are strategies that are driven as what CSOs do when government fails. But when you want to develop a place, you do that through quality education, commitment to processes, earned trust, responsibility, accountability. What palliative does is to reignite and reorient people. But we are using palliative approaches to try to solve our problems. And that is where we're getting it wrong. So we are trying to build trust among citizens. But again, citizens know that our powers end at advocacy. We cannot change the behavior of those in government, right? Somebody is coming to a seminar where he sees a government official who is speaking, and after speaking, and you bring some CSOs to organize some programs, and after that, the citizen will still have to travel back on a bad road, on exorbitant cost of fuel, no electricity at home. But guess what? The government officials drive in their SUVs purchased by taxpayers' money. They live in houses that are run, that have power consistently. They travel on taxpayers' money. So the trust quotient is definitely going to be low. But we are doing our part. Again, I'm saying to my brothers and sisters across Africa, let's not confuse palliative approach to development as the bullet that will give us the development that we want. So the solution to that is not only for us to build trust among citizens, to trust government. Government has to earn the trust. That is where our action and our focus and our energy should be. So let's move it to government. Let's hold government accountable. Let's begin to demand. Let's begin to say no to bad policies, to bad leadership, to poor education. We need to do that so that government begins to perform, and then trust becomes a two-way variable, and then we have a better society and a better Africa.
I'm not gonna lie, that would be a very interesting for us to actually now put the responsibility on our governments. We'll have to wait and see. We definitely have to wait and see that. Eglina, maybe let me come to you now. How do you perceive the impact of regional dynamics and geopolitical shifts of democracy in Africa, particularly in the context of peace and security, even just initiatives that you worked on with COMESA?
Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone, once again. I would first start by mentioning that about 66% of Africans actually prefer democracy, like a democratic system of government. And we can see this through, because most of the African countries actually. Is somebody speaking?
You can carry on.
Okay.
Is everything okay?
And
Okay.
there's like
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
yes, we can hear you. I don't know, somebody's mic must have been on and then it was affecting.
Your audio. Okay. You can start over, please.
So I had said most of Africans actually prefer a democratic system of government, and I was saying we can see this through elections. Most African countries elect their leaders through elections, and that's democracy. And also, we can't deny the fact that parity. Thank you. So I was saying we can't deny the fact that democracy in Africa, the effectiveness of democracy actually is being affected. Like there are a lot of issues, a lot of drivers at play that affect democracy in Africa. This we can attribute this to corruption and also lack of accountability by African leaders in most countries. And then also coming to geopolitics, the part of geopolitics, also we note that geopolitics have a very big impact on the stability of democracy in most African countries. And I'll give you examples on the COMESA region. We have issues, let's say Ethiopia and Somalia, they have geopolitical issues there, and that also disturbs the democracy in both the countries. We can also talk about the DRC issue and situation. Also note that these conflicts, whenever there's a conflict, it disturbs the of maybe terrorism threats. And also, we can't talk about this without getting into the youth and how it's affecting the youth. So we see that in most cases, youths are being labeled as the drivers, like they're being used as tools to destabilize most democratic processes. And also, this can be related to the youth involvement in such issues. We can relate to lack of employment, there are no jobs, no security. Sometimes you can relate it to food insecurity, poverty, and these lead to these youths to take part, maybe to be used as pawns in these government issues to destabilize the democracy of certain countries and to take part in politics of conflict and stuff like that. And on the side, another thing that I would mention that actually plays a part in destabilizing democracy in certain countries is the issue of climate change. This is an issue that is rarely talked about, and most people don't actually relate it to democracy or peace and security, but actually it plays a very vital role in all these decisions that are made regarding democracy. Because let's say, for instance, with the floods in Kenya, with the drought in Zambia, also governments are found in the middle of which area are they supposed to prioritize, which area are they going to mostly put most of their effort on. So and the other part of your question, you asked about initiatives led by organizations, especially in line with COMESA. So with COMESA and relating it to geopolitics, COMESA carries out workshops, let's say, on borders to ensure that there's peace and harmony between two countries. And I'll give an example. Right now, like this week, we've been at the border of Zambia and DRC just to talk to the traders that do their business along the border, try to get their perspectives, try to understand how they do their business, what challenges are they facing, and how they can work together, like on both sides, how the governments can come on board and ensure that there's peace, there's harmony in the way they do their business or trade along the border. Thank you.
Actually, I would have loved for you to go to delve a little bit further on how climate change is destabilizing democracy. That is, I think, through all the conversations I've had so far, that is a new take. So maybe if you can just like delve a little further in that, we would appreciate.
So with climate change, I would also relate it to with COMESA, like the Governance, Peace and Security Unit, we've been trying to understand how is climate change leading to conflicts? How does climate change destabilize the peace and security of nations? So I'll give an example. I'll give an example of Zambia and Malawi. Let's say if there is a drought in Zambia, and then there's famine at the end of it all, like droughts because people can't farm and stuff like that. So there's hunger, there's poverty. And then some people might actually go to Malawi. And then with them moving from Zambia to Malawi, some of them might have fewer intentions. Solely, they're just looking for maybe greener pastures. But in that process, there are others that might have other intentions, which as they go to Malawi, they might destabilize the peace in that country because they have other intentions. It might lead to increased crime rates. And I might also say that if to relate it to, let's say, terrorism and other security issues, if those people are hungry, that's a loophole for maybe military terrorist groups or something to recruit them by saying, okay, since you don't have money, you don't have food, we can give you money, we can give you food. All you have to do is join us, do ABCD, and that also will cause them to, because obviously you don't have anything to do, you don't have food, and somebody's offering you, okay, I'll give you food, I'll give you money. Obviously, they're going to join, and then as they join, they're going to disturb the peace in the nation where they're going, and it will cause unrest. And yeah. I think you're muted. We can't hear you.
Okay. Like I'm saying, I understand where you're coming from with that point. So I think I get why now climate change is a factor in ruffling should I say ruffling feathers in a country, like at least disturbing the peace in a country. So now, if I may come back to you, what strategies do you propose that would successfully strengthen democratic institutions in African countries, and maybe if they can be replicated everywhere else, especially through grassroots initiatives or civic society actors?
Okay. Maybe many strategies have shown success in strengthening the democratic institutions in African countries, many of which we can replicate it elsewhere, with a particular focus on the role of grassroots organizations and civil society actors. Firstly, the civil society empowerment, by empowering civil society organizations through funding, training, and legal protections, enable them to monitor government activities, and also advocate for democratic reforms and hold elected um, official accountables. Also, we can promote civic education by investing in civic education programs which can inform citizens about their rights, about their responsibilities, uh, such as awareness programs of the importance of democratic participations, which can foster an informed electorate capable of making meaningful contributions to democratic process. Um, Moving to the most important point from my point of view, which is electoral reforms. By implementing electoral reforms that ensure transparency, fairness, and inclusivity in the electoral process, which enhance public trust in democratic institutions and also promote the peaceful transitions of power. Maybe we can build independent media. I think not all countries have a real independent media, not just a word, a real independent media, which support independent outlets, which provide unbiased reporting and hold government official accountables, which help to counter misinformation and promote the transparency in governance. Also, we have to work on strengthening the rule of law by ensuring an independent judiciary and upholding constitutional principles in combating corruption, fosters an environment which can foster an environment conducive to democratic governance and respect for human rights. Also, promoting inclusive governance structures. And I think nowadays we all talk about governance as a word and a concept, but I don't think it's applied well. The real meaning of governance, which incorporate diverse perspectives and include those marginalized groups and minority populations, and how to enhance the legitimacy and effective of democratic institutions. Uh, I think I think also about the strategies which strengthen democracy. We can work on the international cooperation by engaging the international partnerships and exchanges to share best practices and how to provide technical assistance and to build networks of supports which can help to strengthen these democratic institutions by learning from successful experiences in other countries. I think those strategies maybe elsewhere requires a tailored approach which take into the account specific contexts and challenges faced by each country. But we have to know that it's essential to engage with local stakeholders, including the grassroots organizations and civil society actors, to ensure that the efforts we have done to strengthen this democratic atmosphere are responsive to the needs and aspirations of the population, and also sustain political will and commitment. Well, the political will and the commitment from both the domestic and the international levels and actors. These are important for driving maybe the meaningful democratic reforms and building resilient democratic institutions over a long term. I think those points are what can strategies have been successful in strengthening the democratic view asked for.
So the youth cafe is freezing or frozen, if that's the correct language.
Yes, I think she lost the connection.
Action. So I'm looking, maybe before she comes back, if everyone can hear me, I think there's a question on the group for me, asking, let me see, well, the question says, what is the process of getting people involved? Trust is easy to say, but it is difficult to build. I totally agree with that position, to say it's easy to say, it's difficult to build. Okay, I think the Youth Cafe is back. We can give them the microphone now. Youth Cafe, if you're here, we lost you for a bit, and I thought we should keep the conversation going because there was a question, and that was why
I think you should continue. You start the question to answer it. Please continue. I'm sure the cafe won't mind you continue. It's good for it to flow.
Okay,
So,
good.
injecting.
Sorry, go on.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. So, building trust is not an easy phenomenon. When you poll people, just poll young people, over 50% of millennials don't believe in the kind of democracy that Africa has today. Gen Zs are farther off. A lot of them don't even understand what the concept is. So again, okay, let's even do it this way. Let's make it very practical. You get on a plane. In fact, you go to a website, buy a ticket, get on the plane touches down, and you are good. You repeat that experience over and over again. What then happens? You trust the website, you trust the airline, you trust the services, and you begin to use them. If they tell you tomorrow, we are, it slightly increase our fare a bit, you go like, well, it's not convenient, but I trust them. Because if I go on their website, I'm going to be able to book my flight. I'm going to be able to get on the plane. Their pilots are so good. I would always get to my destination. So even if it's, just a little more, cost, I don't care. I'll just pay it. That is governance, citizens' engagement, and relationship right there. When governments think that they can get away with anything, then trust is broken. The private businesses that we enjoy, look at Zoom now. Come on, look at Zoom. Zoom came into our lives when we had COVID, and we all can tell that the Zoom, technology that came in 2020 with everybody running to Zoom, it's not the Zoom of today. The Zoom of today has improved in its responsibility to citizens or to the people of the world. Today, we have more options. You have apps. You can raise your hand. There are whiteboards. You can take notes. You can show reactions. You can even show captions. You can record. There's even AI companion. There's a summary. There's a share screen. There's chat. There's this is how you build trust. So governments across Africa must begin to build trust by becoming responsible to citizens. Again, citizens must also become responsible to government, because let's be honest, in Africa, you have about one of the least tax compliance citizenry that you can find. I mean, I can speak for my country, Nigeria, but I know that, come on, man, a lot of us don't pay taxes. Again, why? Because a lot of us in Nigeria today are our own local government councillors. We're our own House of Representative members. We're our own president. You know why? Because there are a lot of communities today in Nigeria that don't have pipe-borne water. We provide boreholes in our homes. We provide private security. We buy generator to generate electricity. A lot of things that government is supposed to do to create the collective is missing. So trust is hard. trust is definitely hard. So on both the side of government and the side of the citizens, we have not collectively shown responsibility. But for the sake of this conversation, and I think it is very important, as I'm speaking to young people, look, our generation must take the conversation of governance differently. We cannot always point to, oh, government, because let me tell you something. A lot of us are here now, maybe we're not in government today. I mean, the next 4, 5 years, 10 years, you'll be in government. And then you realize that you need taxes to be able to do certain things, and the people are not paying. But again, you then realize that it is not your fault because the people before you did not invest in building and creating a society that is well educated, well empowered, and well equipped. And let me round off by saying this. I have studied now and realized, because of the issue of power dynamics, I can authoritatively now say that a lot of African leaders are deliberately underdeveloping their societies because there are schools of thought that say if you want to retain and maintain power, you have to make sure that your society and your citizens are not empowered to think independently. Because citizens that have the capacity to think and act independently are the ones capable of holding government accountable. Young men and women of Africa, your generation and that of the future is at risk because you have a group of people who are subscribing to an ideology that says you and your children must remain uneducated, underdeveloped, so they can retain power. That is your biggest problem. So even as you try to practice democracy, you are not empowered enough to practice democracy, because democracy is a power tool put in the hands of those who don't understand how to use it. They will self-destruct. Africa has been self-destructing for the last 60 years because you don't have quality education rich in the liberal arts. You don't have quality education that build roads, technology, planes, and cars, and all your data centers. What you are doing is that we've continued to recycle the colonial curriculum that was designed to make us just to be able to read and write. So what I would say is building trust is a two-way street. It's both the actions of government and actions of citizens. But it's not an easy task because it has to be a sustainable responsibility. You pay your taxes, you keep your community clean, you volunteer, you intern, you become patriotic, you serve in the military, you serve in government, and ensure that what your people don't have today, your ambition is to make sure they have it tomorrow. That is how you build trust.
I see we have a politician is coming soon. We have a big politician soon. God luck. God bless. Well, I'm enjoying listening to you.
Okay. I mean, I don't know. I'm just speaking. Thank you anyway. Thank you.
Yes, indeed. You're actually, I was gonna say you're actually speaking to the choir. There's a popular meme in Kenya which goes serikali tafadhali saidia, which is that's Swahili, but in English is government please help us. It's a very common meme when you're in trouble. Hey, tafadhali serikali saidia meme. So I think you're very much speaking to the choir. We are too dependent on the government helping us. We're not really thinking for ourselves and how best we can move our situations forward, at least try and get our aspirations on the table. So absolutely, we're with you. You're preaching to the choir. I'm not sure how best that can be done because Africa has been Africa for some time. But with these conversations, I'm pretty sure with platforms like this, we can get the youth to take responsibility of empowering themselves in, as you said, the liberal arts, yes? and push Africa to where we actually want to see it, or at least strengthen our democratic future. In that regard, I was gonna ask a follow-up questions to know her. I'm not quite sure if she's still here anymore. However, now that God bless you're still here, we can move on to you. How can African countries learn from each other's experiences and best practices to enhance democratic governance across the continent, particularly considering the perspectives of different generations? I think this kind of also touches on just what you said, but you can expound more on that.
Okay, I will talk about two things about the youth experience, which is the youth programs and the regional forums, which will be a chance for sharing experiences and the practices in each of the institutions. Also, I will talk about the electoral reforms and the elections process in different countries, different African countries all over the continent. We can share best practice throughout the observation of those elections. Maybe I was a local observer of the presidential elections in Egypt at 2018, and I coordinate a group of international observers who came from all over the world, and especially from the African countries. This can be a real example of how to share the practices among countries when they come to our country and observe the electoral process and see how we move on in this process and the obstacles and the challenges and how we success in this process. This might be a real example of how to share these practices. Moving also again to the practices of the civil society in NGOs in Egypt and on the other African countries. Maybe when we meet in the COMESA Youth Advisory Panel as a representative from different countries, it's a chance to share the practices of our countries and also from our regions at the North Africa. Maybe me as a representative of North Africa in this panel, I share the practices of not only Egypt, Tunisia, Libya, Sudan, and so on. This might be a mean of communication and how to share these practices and how to work on real transparency and fairness and governance among our activities and also our institutions we are working on and we are representing, which will be in a larger scale in our countries, in our region, and on the whole continent.
Okay, thank you, Noha, for that. All right, Eglina, if I may move on to you. What role can international partnerships and multilateral organizations play in supporting African countries' efforts to strengthen democratic institutions? And maybe how has COMESA contributed to this agenda?
Thank you very much. To begin with, we have to take note that international organizations and multilateral organizations and partnerships actually play a very important role in supporting countries in strengthening their democratic institutions. And then I'll speak more especially in the case of COMESA and how they try to contribute to this agenda of strengthening and supporting democratic institutions in countries, especially when it comes to the issue of elections. Elections usually and most of the times are being associated with elections are just used like to mask other activities that are happening. They'll say, no, the elections are democratic, but in the actual sense, what is happening is contrary to what is being preached. And then in line with what COMESA is doing, COMESA has a committee of elders, and these elders are tasked to provide what we call preventive diplomacy or mediation preventive diplomacy. What we mean by this is when there are elections, let's say the way Zambia had elections in 2021, these elders, one of the elders came to Zambia actually to talk to both the opposition and the ruling party to ensure that whatever the result of the election, they have to understand and accept that this is what the people want. This is democracy. And another thing that COMESA does with the elders is providing observer missions, like election observer missions. Like they go to, if there are elections in the country, they go there and they observe the elections to ensure that they are done in a democratic way, and it's just not a mask where they just say elections, oh, it's democratic, but in the actual sense, they are not democratic. And also, I would like to add on the fact that we keep talking about youths, especially in terms of elections. When it's election time, youths are being used as tools to disrupt peace or to disrupt democratic processes. So through the elders, COMESA also does what we call intergenerational dialogues, where the elders and the young people come together and share experiences. And the elders are the knowledge and experience on how to maintain a democratic state, or how to ensure that elections, especially, are in a democratic way. And another thing that COMESA does through the governance, peace, and security units, and in line with the youth, is we conduct and we understand that in as much as youths are being labeled as tools of violence, they can also be used as an instrument to bring peace in these communities, in these countries. So what we do is we bring the youths together from different countries, different regions of Africa. We bring them together. They interact with each other, talk about the challenges that are going through their different countries, exchange experiences, and also come up with solutions on how they can be a part of a peaceful country or peaceful community. Thank you.
Eglina, are you still there? Okay. Okay. I'm seeing a question here from Caleb Masusu. We're gonna have a question and answer times. We'll have a section for question and answer, so do not worry. Just if you have any questions, just put them in the chat, and then we can address them as soon as the second session is over. So let me give the floor to Mary Ododa. She will now take you through the second session, which will cover strategies for strengthening democratic institutions. So Mary, if you could just I'm handing the microphone over to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope I am clear enough. I hope I can be heard. I am kindly requesting for my panelists to please put their cameras on. And just to introduce the second session, we're going to be discussing on the strategies for strengthening democratic institutions. This particular session, we're going to dig deeper in terms of democracy on the continent, and our speakers are quite experienced. They've worked in different countries, and they've been able to sort of have a look at the nexus and the trends on what is going on So we want to understand the complexities on governance, analyze some of the obstacles that are hindering institutional effectiveness, as well as highlight innovative approaches that get to pave the way for sustainable democratic progress. So without further ado, let me introduce my panelists. I have Clifford Omondi, who is a political scientist with expertise in ontological security, conflict, and frontier theories. His research focuses on topics such as counterterrorism, violent extremism, and community-based armed groups. Mr. Mondi has also been involved in various research projects, including evaluating the Norwegian embassy project in Somalia and Kenya, and contributing to a grant proposal under the EU Horizon 2020 program. He's also been actively engaged in climate change and sustainable development initiatives, training African youth negotiators under the Pan-African Climate Justice Alliance, and participating in international climate negotiations since COP12. Welcome, Cliff. Very happy to have you here. And Cliff is Kenyan. We also have Mr. Femi Omere, who is a dual citizen of Nigeria and the United Kingdom, but lives in Tanzania, so very Pan-African. And he serves as the founder and managing director of Hosted in Africa Group Limited, and I recommend everyone to register on that platform. This platform was established in 2021. I am a member as well, offering state-of-the-art virtual networking and collaboration spaces aimed at global Africans and their allies. He has a background in human rights law, as well as he's a human rights specialist in the UK and continues to provide legal services in East Africa. He's also contributed significantly to capacity building efforts for various organizations, including the African Legal Support Faculty and the Law Society of Kenya. Femi also has a recent appointment whereby he operates as an independent monitor in the Tanzanian mining sector, underscoring his commitment to promoting human rights and corporate accountability. And our third panelist for this session is Dr. Jessica Kabwela. Dr. Jessica, are you online? Fantastic, yes. So Dr. Jessica is in Malawi, and she's a feminist activist. She's an educator and a former legislator with extensive experience in feminist macroeconomics. She holds a PhD in comparative literature from the Binghamton State University in New York. She also has 20 years of teaching experience and has conducted research on gender issues in Africa. She's held leadership roles in educational and governance institutions and has published extensively on development issues, particularly gender-related issues. And she currently serves as the acting campus director for the Malawi School of Governance, the Kanengo campus. And she continues to advocate for gender equality and social justice. So let me start with Dr. Jessica. How would you currently describe the state of democracy in Africa compared to previous years? And what role do you see women playing in shaping the future of democratic governance? Dr. Jessica? Is she here with us? Okay, I think maybe we've lost our connection. I can pass over the mic to Femi. Femi, I have a question for you. Looking at the extensive experience you have, not only on the continent, but working with a lot of international organizations, what role do you believe external actors play and donor agencies in shaping the democracy in Africa? And how have their interventions aligned with local priorities and aspirations?
Oh, this is a controversial one. Thank you so much. Well, firstly, thank you for inviting me, and it's a real pleasure to be amongst this wonderful gathering. Yeah, it's an interesting one because there's so many, so it would be hard to give a straight answer. This is how it is. They come with different agendas. They come with different pockets. Some have more funding than others. Some are pushing particular types of, if you like, political agendas. Some are sociological agendas. It's so varied, and I think that therein lies a problem, because it's like everyone else knows how Africa should be, and I think this is a really important thing, and we've touched on this via some of the comments of the previous speakers. God bless in particular. And I want to elaborate a bit on what he said. And I think it's vitally important in terms of strategies of how our external friends, I mean, some of them must be friends, I would suggest ought to be looking at the Project Africa. Let me call it that way for now. First and foremost is what tends to happen when we discuss and open a subject about African development. It's as though we are a child. We are brothers, sisters, children of, those who originated, who formed humanity first. I think it's really important to understand that. And when we understand that, we then look at, well, as humanity kind of traveled and progressed, where were we in that story? Very, very solidly at the center in terms of civilizations. And I think that because there's been a dislocation, and a very deliberate one, to kind of camouflage a lot of what Africa has been, maybe it wouldn't have been called Africa at that time. We are in a state of unknowing. So we come to the table as though we are children, when in fact we are not. And I think this is really important, because therein lies so much of our anxiety as to where are our solutions coming from. Most of our solutions are sitting beside us on a daily basis. And I can be very anecdotal about things I've seen, I've been a part of, even in very localized situations. Nobody's writing about this necessarily. It's not in a journal, it's not in an academic book or what have you, but it's happening on the ground. And I think there are studies about that so much of what is actually happening, the solutions that are working, are on the ground, not in the center. And I think there has to be a serious shift in terms of what we understand as democratic institutions, what we understand as, our stories. And it's not one story. Stories is pluralized. We're many peoples across the continent of Africa, but we are bound in certain values. And I would suggest Ubuntu is one of those central value systems that permeates across the continent. Yes, we sway from it, just like any other peoples across the world are not always faithful to their, most central of ethics. But that issue of I'm a person because you're a person, I am because you are, this is such a powerful dimension to African polity that is not that far away, but it's as though we've forgotten it at the center. So what I'm suggesting is that when people come to intervene, those with bigger pockets than us at this moment in time of the world system must understand that part and parcel of where Africa is today is to actually not develop. It's not a development game, in my view, in many people's view. It's not a development game. It's a regenerative game. We need to regenerate, because so much of what we have lost, if centralized, is put at the center, and if really fueled in terms of how we develop and I use that word now, how we develop our systems, how we fund those systems, maybe we start to see different outcomes. And let me give you just a quick anecdote about something that happened just a few weeks ago. And I've mentioned this on another discussion. There was a really nasty stabbing in my local area. Two young fishermen, Friday night, drinking too much, and one bottled the other. I mean, I was brought up in London. This was happening every weekend, by the way. So, that's what happens when young men drink lots. That's what can happen. So, nothing that we say, oh, this is African. This is youthful madness that can happen. Now, we all know, and we all come to realize that our police in the continent can be extremely heavy-handed. We know that, brutally so. But let me give you a different story that happened on this particular occasion. This chap was taken to the police station, and there were many, obviously, outcomes that could have happened. He could have got beaten up, he could have been, banged up, and so on. What actually happened was this, that the police officer in charge got the Munya Kitty, that's like the local chairman, got the parties around and said, look, you got options here. You're part of the same community. you can either decide that you're going to look after this person who you actually know, because actually, as we know, crime normally happens to people who actually know each other. That's by and part. That's a big part of what happens. You can look after this man for the next few months, tend to his wounds, make sure he's fed, and so on. Or we can go down the official route. Which one would you prefer? Now, you could be cynical and say, well, of course, he's going to choose that one. But actually, that's the one he chose, and he was faithful to doing it. And what's the outcome of that? A restored relationship. This is restorative justice. This is powerful stuff that actually the West can learn from us, and they do. So my point is, and this is just a local anecdote. I'm sure many of panelists here could come up with many of these stories as well. The point is that so much of what we need is within our view, and we have to be more confident in inculcating them, not just into our daily practices, because they are there to a large extent at a local level, but at the central level. Our democracies need to be our stories. I grew up in the UK from birth to 35. That's where I lived. And I studied and I did British constitutional law. It's a story. Magna Carta, 800 and odd years ago. And you build upwards and upwards and upwards and upwards. The people are part of it. There's some parts of it that are brutal. There's women can't vote here. There's this, that, and the other. There's so much rich tapestry to the story of democracy when you come to the UK. And you could say the same for France, Holland, all over Europe. When you come to African democracy, it's at 1957, when Ghana got its independence. How is that a democratic story of our historical roots as the cradle of civilization? It's nonsensical. So we have to, it's our duty. It's not outsiders' duty. It is our duty to reclaim those spaces. Yes, our friends who see value in this externally can help us, but it is our duty, and we can do. And there are people within the community who have the ability, and we must, strengthen them and, really get them to be part of the center. And I'm not saying this as though none of this is happening. It is, but we've got to, if you like, scale this. And this is where technology comes in, because now we've got things that artificial intelligence. And by the way, that's another term I do not like. And I advocate this all the time. I don't like that. Why artificial? This is a man-made or a human-made source. What do we want it to be? Artificial, or do we want it to complement our intelligence as human beings? So it's a complementary intelligence that we can leverage and be intentional as where we want that to take us to. Now, just think of Africa's laws at the moment. Because of the colonial legacy, they're all over the place. Can you imagine now deploying a large language model that is focused on bringing and bridging these gaps? Those are things now we can be intentional about when we look at complementary intelligence, when we look at technology. So it's those types of things. And I was pleased to hear what God Bless was saying about, some of these apps that they're, but this is absolutely fantastic. Because that's what we need to be intentional, see where the gaps are, see how we can now move, because it's not about a 14th century situation. If I talk about 14th century Oba in Benin and how that was, of course it's important, but we're now in the 21st century. And by the way, when we talk about governance, one small thing I would like to say and this is something I learned in the last 10, 15 years, that when we talk about, kind of democracy, and then we look at our power structures of the past, the Oba of Benin, so everybody would just think this absolute monarchy, he rules over everyone. Well, yes, he does to an extent, but he has an absolute duty to the population. That power didn't come without supreme responsibility. And by the way, if it was not exercised, what was the penalty? It's brutal, his death. We wouldn't want to do that in the 21st century. But the point is, this is not just a free-for-all. Oh, I'm a powerful man, I can do what I like. Or I'm a powerful queen, I can do what I like. Absolutely not. It was for the people, of the people. And if you don't do it, the punishment could be as brutal as your own life. That is a check and balance. And there were people and chiefs surrounding that individual. Now, of course, I'm not saying go back to that in the 14th century, but what I am saying is that we have a story that we need to regenerate and modernize and bring back, because that's where now you get the connection. I don't think people are generally connected to the, how can I put it, the post-colonial settlement packages that we've all had. And I know they've been, tinkered around the edges over the last, decades, but essentially, they've come from settlements, and that's why they looked very much as a Western paradigmed constitutional dynamic. And so I've just had my roof taken down today, and all the tiles were taken down. There was a relayment, and then we pieced back the tiles on that roof piece by piece. And I think I was thinking about as we were talking, I was like, actually, this is what we need to do. It sounds kind of like, how can we do that? Well, it's not going to happen overnight. But if we see it as a project, as we see it not in our lifetime, even you, Mary, you're a young lady, but it may not be in your lifetime either. But you know what? You can start piecing down the foundations bit by bit, being intentional. And as we've said, this is not one person or one country's or one nation's story. This is a collective story. Remember, Europe and those places were at war with each other for hundreds of years. They sat around the table, carved us up, by the way, to try and piece themselves together. But that's another matter. But, it was about, you know what? We need to act as one to at least a certain degree. And we can see that that's beginning to happen. And that's corrective government. That's going to be corrective government, just like corrective democracy. It's not going to happen perfectly overnight. It's a story that needs to continue, and it needs to go back. Sankofa, we have to go back in order to come forward. Let us understand the past. Let us not be somehow depressed about being beaten up for the last 400 years. It happens. We were at the helm, by the way, not that long ago. 400 years in the history of humanity is not that long. 400 years in the history of Gaia, which is 3.6 billion years old, is not very long. So let us, mature and take our rightful places as cradle of civilization, mature up and build our systems piece by piece. I stop there for now.
Thank you so much. That's quite comprehensive, and also just in terms of us understanding our past in order to know where we're going. I think that's quite important, because I feel as though our story has been told for us over and over again. Just looking even at Hollywood, for instance, whenever they're telling African stories, it's not even African actors. So I feel as though the charge is on us. I do agree with you. The charge is on us to be able to now shift the narrative, shift our thinking. What are we doing? How are we going forward? And I also have to agree with God Bless in the first session where he spoke on just understanding what democracy is. Do we even know what that is? Where do we start? How do we go? So in terms of awareness and advocacy, the onus is on us. We cannot wait for international actors to come in and hold conferences for us and hold workshops and do all these things. It is up to us to do this, to carry the story, to be able to shape what the way forward needs to look like for us. And you're right, it might not happen in my generation, but the onus is on us. If we haven't started, we need to start now. And I'm loving the spaces that young people are in right now. I mean, we had from Eglina who works in Comesa, and they work in 21 countries. And these are young people, so you can just imagine the level of impact that they have and the kind of work that they're doing in terms of having the intergenerational dialogue that she spoke about. I was privileged to actually be a panel in Zambia last year, whereby we sat with elders and we sat with ambassadors and we were having conversations. So young people are curating spaces to be able to engage in this and to be able to shape how we want democracy to look like. So yes, I agree with you. And on that note, I do want to just build up on what you've spoken about to Dr. Kabila. Dr. Kabila, are you able to hear me?
Yes, I am able to hear you.
Okay, fantastic. Just listening to what Femi has shared with us, in your experience, how would you describe the state of democracy in Africa at the moment compared to the previous years? And what role do you see women playing in shaping the future of democratic governance?
Yeah. I think if someone was to ask me what I think about the state of democracy, I think in one word I would say it's very colonized. I find, and I think that why the word colonize has come to me is I see and hear so many things being attributed to Africa when they are not even African. You know, I think this African exceptionalism of us probably attributing failures in majority to Africans really worries me, because when I look at the democracy, I find it shaped a lot by Euro-Western religion, Euro-Western cultures. And, you know, I sit there and I feel like I wish I could take the generation that I think is the only one that can rescue us from this through Fanon's reading, Bramsky's readings, you know, just for them to understand that the Africa you are seeing now is a construction of people who decided to take advantage of it. And we are not such a sob story, you know. I think it took me going to the US and doing my PhD there too, for me to find out, I'm sorry to say, just how pathetic these places are, yet they sell a lot of success to us. If you ask me now, the mess that we have in politics in Africa is by no way close to what's going on in the America, I mean, in the United States of America. That's pure, it's a circus. You know, I sit there and I'm like, only Americans can elect crazy people like this. I mean, I look at Trump and look at what he thinks about women. And you find that people who are carrying placards telling me, very white, very male, but I'm sorry to say, very dumb, you know, and very selfish. And nobody said there's something wrong with whiteness, you know. But when we are here and we get things wrong, things which we are largely doing out of copying them, it's blamed on us as a people. Okay. So I think the major problem is our politics needs decolonization, urgent decolonization. We need to be brave enough. For me, I think making mistakes, whatever, it's part of success. And you know, the shine in diamond is seen from the cracks. And the youth, this is the thing that makes me happy about the youth and women, is that they are a story in resilience. They're not afraid of mistake of making mistakes, which is something which our generation had problems. If you ask me what other thing I see a very patriarchal politics. Politics that's based on who is powerful, not who is serving or who is effective, but it's a Tyson versus whoever kind of politics. It's a boys' club. It is a big man politics, right? So what I see a lot is also a serious trend of civic education that is just deficient. People who don't understand that we are because of where we came from. We are because of a collective. It's not a politics that's built on the fact that what you call a hand is a collective of 5 fingers and not 1 finger, you know, and the fact that as Africans, we've always shown that we might have different teeth in our mouth, but they all stay together, even though they're different shapes. And that's what we've done years and years. They've tried to break it. It hasn't worked, you know. So I think one of the other things that I find problematic is we are trying to get a square cake from a round tin, and that cannot happen, you know. Or in other words, I'm saying, as long as we are using European and American and Eastern, is it Chinese or whatever, Christian or Muslim, put them all together. What they are built on saying the youth, the structure of the political party is built on saying women and youth are wings of the party. They are not the main body of the party, right? And for me, I think this is where we need to change this madness. We can't have a political arena that defines youth as a wing and that just flaps around whilst the main body is going on, and women are also seen in the same way. That's why for me, I think if I was to be asked what one thing should be done, it's affirmative action. I think we need zebra lists. We need youth to be given, to actually carve space where the youth are part of a parliament. Disability, there's space. Without affirmative action in our politics, we are going nowhere, because power is not going to give power. It is, you have to take it. And my message is, we have got to focus on how do we build a movement that sees a collaboration between youth and women, not something which thinks when women are fighting, oh, let them fight, or it's not gonna work. All right. The other thing that I see is a politics that is very heteronormative. That thinks gender is a static thing. A man is a man, a woman is a woman. The simple binary that we've been sold by capitalism, and we've bought it hook, line, and sinker. And we think sex has a race. Your gender has a race. And people are even brave enough to say, no, the LGBTI movement is a Western thing, and nothing could be further from the truth. Sex has got no race. Sex is not something that, I've always said, governments are not there to get into my bedroom or to tell me what kind of sex to have. It's not their business. And as Africans, if you look at our myths and our proverbs, we are not there saying whoever is not like me is a demon or whatever. This whole demon and earth business and heaven business is something that came, and we bought it hook, line, and sinker. Yeah. So for me, if you say what are the trends, finally, I would say I see a lot of politics that doesn't care about the personal. And until we look at the personal and we make that political, we understand that the fact that budgets have to deal with empowering youth into politics, tax must be spent on this. It mustn't be an agenda for people who are coming from outside. Menstrual hygiene should be a political issue. The issue of abortion should actually be something which women decide for themselves, not the way the colonials have done, where they've come and told us what to do with our bodies. But I see us walking straight into the issues of white people and running our politics in a way that says personal issues mustn't be discussed. Well, the personal is what makes the collective. So it's about time we started seeing that the person is important. I think I had lots of whatever, but I know, online presentations need to be peppered with probably living issues that I think can be summarized. Let me quickly go to what should women do in order for us to enhance this. Like I've said, for me, we need to approach this, number one, from making sure that we are scaling up literacy. Literacy must really reach women, must reach the youth, and the women who have gotten pregnant and whatever need to go back to school. And we should stop this moralization of the state. Let's give services. Comprehensive sexual reproductive health rights must kick in our education system. This business of if we teach about sex, we're going to make people have sex. We need to get out of that. In other words, we need to understand that sex is just like food. Let's sit down and talk about this and not hide our heads in the sand. The other thing that will help, I think, in terms of getting women more into democracy is for us to also look into financing women's participation, because politics is very expensive. And if they're going to get in there apologetically, they will not be voted in. So they have to be well educated. They should be financed. And let's have political parties adopting affirmative action. There should be something wrong if a leader can go and meet his party and he's meeting a bunch of men. It must be illegal. They must make sure that there is certain gender protocol is followed. Here in Malawi, we've got the equality laws. Let's be legal. And these political parties must stop being allowed to do these criminal ventures that they are doing. And political violence needs to be seen. And then, if we really want women to participate, we need to deal with this animal called corruption. Corruption is stopping us from service delivery. Corruption is something which we just talk about. And this one, I put it on the doorstep of our citizens. We can't expect the politicians who are benefiting from this to stop it. But if we stop voting for them and we make it we here, especially in the global south, in the African countries, we actually say, no, we are not having you. And nobody's even going to campaign. We are not interested because you've killed us. People don't have medicine in hospitals. People don't have, so we are not having criminals because, to tell you the truth, corruption is the same as getting a gun and shooting those who are in the villages and the urban poor, because they depend on these hospitals. They depend on on the schools for them to go far. But as far as I'm concerned, we actually have corrupt cartels in the name of politicians. These are just teams of people who sit down and decide to make their arrangements. Very, very final. I think if someone said, what do we do about women? Politics has to change. It must be gendered. It must talk about abortion rights. It must talk about LGBTI. It must embrace what we call gender. It must reward powerful women and not have these women who just are worshippers and they are busy milking the patriarchal dividend, and people call those, doing gender should not just be about figures. Let's see people actually reward and vote in and support the so-called problematic, troublesome women instead of petrol bombing them. I myself am someone who left parliament mainly because I was asking questions and critiquing and taking a stand and standing for what they called controversial issues. But if the voters could get up and actually say, no, this is a candidate that we want, politics rewards those who get votes. So for me, it's about changing the landscape of the voters, and that can only happen through education. And I'm not talking about just Western education. I'm talking about education that is decolonized. In other words, the curriculum needs to be redone, overhauled, and stop telling people that Africans are failures, women are failures. We are not. In fact, a lot of what they're telling you, they did, and what Africa is doing, they are doing it 10 times over. I'll stop there.
I actually have to agree with you. And just to look, over the years, since some of the African countries got independence, I think just off the top of my head, the one country that I can probably say has made an improvement in terms of looking at democracy and politics from a gender lens is Rwanda. I know there are other countries that are really trying to do this. I know Kenya, we have the 2/3 gender rule, but we still haven't gotten there as such. And yes, I agree with you. Democracy is not a one lens sort of scope that we look at when it comes to making governments work. There's so many different aspects to it. There's so many different stakeholders that need to be brought to the table, and equality. We need to have transparency. I know earlier on we spoke on accountability and opposition. All these different aspects need to come into play to make sure that democracy actually works and works for us. Thank you so much for that. And there's one point that you brought up that I would like Mr. Mondi to expound on, and this was on corruption. So Dr. Kabwela has, she spoke a bit on corruption, but I'd like for you to expound on this a bit more. For African countries, I know we've probably all states face issues to do with corruption and political polarization. When we speak about electrical integrity, that's usually up in the air. It's a very dicey topic. But according to you, how do you think we can address such obstacles just across the scope? And if you can please respond in terms of what civil society organizations can do, academia, so the different stakeholders, how can we address such challenges that we face on the continent? Cliff, you're on mute.
Thank you. Can you all hear me?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yes.
Thank you so much. It's quite interesting to hear all the talks and debate. I was really getting a lot. First of all, I would say I'm not a young person, so I'm very old. So, but it's quite interesting to hear what different people are saying. But what I want is, before I touch on corruption, polarization, and electoral integrity, or the academic institution and the civil society touch on democracy in Africa. I think from the academic point of view, we need to understand the concept democracy. And most of us who have studied political science will agree with me. There is no political philosopher who likes democracy. If you read philosophy, no one, no political scientist, if you want to look at the African philosophers, if you want to look at the Greek philosophers, if you want to look at the Middle East philosophers, no one liked democracy. And one of the questions, why didn't they like democracy? It's not that they did not like democracy, but it is because democracy is expensive. So we are looking at democracy from, number one, we are looking at democracy. Currently in Africa, we are looking at democracy from what was brought to us, which is really an interesting case because at least we are starting from somewhere. But indeed, democracy is a system of governance which requires majority rule or popular rule. But then democratization in Africa is a different thing. And that's why I even asked about the trust process, this trust concept as a political concept. Because democratization in Africa involves the process, right? So if we want to take the Western culture of democracy, we will talk of human rights, we will talk of tolerance, we will talk of institutionalization, and we will talk of liberal political system. Which, if you look at the African system, there's a problem there. Because if you want to talk about human rights, the former speaker just talked about human rights, women's rights, and youth rights. There is a problem, and let me emphasize why there's a problem, or rather a challenge. Africa's democracy must be looked into from the pre-colonial Africa, where we had different African systems, and someone had mentioned that. For example, the Songhai Kingdom or the Songhai Empire, the Baganda Empire, if you go to Mali, and so on. I've studied quite a few of these African political. Another thing is that the challenge of African system is due to the colonial legacy or the colonial government which brought dominance in Africa. And the colonial dominance led us to a pre-colonial system which gave us elitism. And this is how I'll explain elitism. Number one, if you look at most of us here meeting in Zoom, either we are in the capital city or we are, there's some social structure which allows us to meet here. A young person in Kibera or in Soweto or in somewhere in Samburu or somewhere in Baidoa in Somalia or would not be able to meet in Zoom. So there's the level of elitist culture which we inherited from pre-colonial Africa. So that level of colonial elitist creates corruption. It creates, politicians are so powerful because when they get into office, we worship them, right? And then I will take you to another level, which is, I've mentioned pre-colonial, colonial, and post-colonial. There's another aspect where we went from post-colonial system, which has elitism, to the period of liberal hegemony. That's an international variable, where America won from Russia, and then most African countries between 1985 to around 1995, 49 African countries became democratic. Democratic, I mean, they started having electoral systems where they vote their president. And there's a lot of bloodshed towards that period. Then I will also take you to another system where now currently we have a multipolar system where Africans will not just look at the West, but we are looking at China, for example. Now, if you look at Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger, they're looking into Russia. They want to work with Russia and so on. So that variable, the international variable, is affecting our democracy. That's a challenge. And there are very interesting developments. Number one is state building, and state building here, I want to talk of state building from the level of multipolarity. And this is, I'm talking about the region, the period of 2017 going onward. This is the time where American liberal hegemony was challenged by China and was challenged by Russia. For example, some of you who understand international relations, you will know that in 2014, Russia started challenging America. And in 2017, now we are going towards a liberal hegemony where African countries, politicians in Africa could go to China, they could go to other countries to work with different different governments. So from the level of state building, there has been very interesting scenarios. And I'll mention Ethiopia, I will mention Kenya, I'll mention Somalia. And this is how state building has been. If you look at the Somalia system, the Somalia has what we call clan system, something that has been written by academician called 4.0 system. It is not one party, one vote. It is not one person, one vote, but it is a college-like system of voting where clan elders or clan leaders have more of the votes. They are the ones who are voting, they are voting the politicians and so on. It is working very well in Somalia. And this has been a clan system, bringing the Somalia clan system into governance or into the Somali constitution. In Kenya, something very interesting happened in 2011 after the electoral violence. Kenya developed ethnic counties, I would say county government. So we had, in Kenya, we have about 56 ethnic communities. And Kenya took these 56 communities and made them into 47 ethnic counties. So we have Samburu County, we have Turkana County, we have all the way up to 47. So we have what we call ethnic groupings. And ethnicity is one of the major problems in Africa. Most people are not talking about ethnicity in Africa. Look at Agenda 2063. And you even peruse the Agenda 2063, look at agenda number 11 of the African Union. It does not talk about ethnicity. Yet, most of our politics is about ethnic cleavages. We take our ethnic cleavages into parliament. We take our ethnic cleavages into elections. So African countries must understand our history, and our history is having ethnic nations. And Ethiopia has done quite something very interesting. If you look at the Ethiopian constitution, Ethiopia has ethnic cleavages into the constitution. These ethnic groupings have a lot of power. They can even recall the prime minister if he's doing something, they can recall him for a dialogue. And it can even lead to his removal from power. So what I'm saying, we start from somewhere, and ethnic cleavages within African political system will lead to accountability. If we are talking about corruption, I mean, corruption is everywhere. Corruption is in human DNA. Not just, it is in our human DNA. The only differences with maybe a Chinese minister, and this I will give an example of Kenya because I know Kenya so well. You find that if there is a project, most of our corruptions are very huge, mega corruption. But of course, China, there's a lot of corruption if you look at the Chinese communist system. If you look at Europe, but they have their traditional systems, which brings accountability. So that traditional system, which brings accountability, can counter corruption. Our traditional system can counter electoral integrity. And when I talk about electoral integrity, I will post here, I wrote a very good policy brief on election success in Kenya, and I'll post for you to read later. What I'm just trying to say here is that if you look at African democracy, we have inherited the concept democracy from the Western world. And then we have forgotten our basis of our political philosophy as Africans. So our political philosophy will give, someone mentioned, I think it's Femi mentioned Ubuntu, but we look at Ubuntu in a very naive way. You know, I am because you were. And if you interrogate Ubuntu, you will find that most Africans will relate Ubuntu when it favors them, but not when it doesn't favor them. So we are communal when I am getting your money, but I am not communal if it's about my money. So responsibility, I would say, will come, and fighting corruption and even this political polarization will come from the fact that we understand that we are nations. Tanzania has almost 103 ethnic groups. Nigeria and the Democratic Republic of Congo, it has like 200 plus ethnic groups. These ethnic groupings have beliefs and they have political traditional systems. Why don't we put these traditional systems into our political system? And then from there, accountability will come. And a very good example is Kenya. Right now, Kenya has ethnic counties. And if money is coming towards the county, I don't care who becomes president. I would not care who becomes president. So that is the first strategy, I would say, in terms of fighting corruption, in terms of fighting electoral integrity, is that we need to bring our African traditional systems into democratization process. Number two, I would want to emphasize political stability. And political stability, I will give an example of Somali. Currently, Somali cannot stand on its own. And if you want to tell me that Somali should have one man, one rule, and Somali should have human rights, should talk about human rights today, I think we are becoming very naive. And most of our youth in Africa are very naive. We have very naive youth community. So what should we do? Number one, we need to focus on stability of African countries, stability in Somali. Make sure that Somali is stable, the young people can go to school, women can feed their children, and they can feed, young people can get food, women can feed their children and take care of themselves. Then from there, we can talk about human rights. So political stability is one of the best strategies for us. How can I go to Somalia and talk about gay rights with Al-Shabaab? It's impossible. It's impossible. So I need to talk, and I'm not disputing human rights here. Don't take me literally. I am not disputing human rights. What I'm saying is we need to look at the problems in Africa. Somalia has a bigger problem of political instability. In Kenya, if you go to northeastern Kenya, this community, northern Kenya and northeastern Kenya, you will find this community, some of them do not even have access to school. They cannot access school. They cannot access basic rights such as healthcare. The same if you go to Uganda, for example, the Karamoja region. these young people, even in southern Somalia, they cannot access the basic needs. So first of all, political stability. We make sure there is peace and security. Once these people have peace and security, we can talk about tolerance. Someone mentioned issues to do with the trust. We can talk about tolerance. And if you look at the concept tolerance, you will find it in every African traditional culture. You can find it. You can find it in Uganda. You can find it with the Fulanis in Senegal. It is there. The element of tolerance and trust and how they managed it. So issues. So after we get political stability, then I mentioned of linking African values to the constitutions we have, because I'm not sure you can tell Museveni that the next election, you can tell me that in the next election Museveni will be defeated. No, he will not. I'm not sure that you can tell me that if we talk about accountability, if Ramaphosa is found corrupt, he will step down. He will not. So we need to deal with the realities. What are the realities? The realities is you can never remove a sitting president in Africa with elections. You can't. So what do? We bring this system. We link our systems, just like Kenya, for example, did it. Somalia has done it. Ethiopia has done it. Bit by bit, we link our political systems with what we have or what we are defining as democracy. And then maybe the last bit, the African population, the youth and women, and by women, I talk of women in rural areas. You go to rural Somalia, you go to southern Somalia, Ogaden region in Ethiopia, or northeastern Kenya. You cannot talk about women's rights there. You can't, because these women don't even have a right. It's a strong patriarchal system. So you cannot talk about women. Even as a researcher, you're saying you want to interview women. The women themselves, they will tell you, no, but you've talked to our men. Because it's a patriarchal system. And the youth are very naive. What they know in northern Kenya, the pastoral communities in the Horn of Africa, the young people know about illegal guns. Because if I have an illegal gun, I will protect my father's property. So even if African Agenda 2016 is talking about silencing the guns, it will not happen, because illegal guns are coming from Yemen. They are coming, even right now, they are coming through Egypt, through the Palestinian war, and so on. So first of all, if we want to think of silencing the guns and bring democracy and human rights, we need to talk about the political systems, which were there. What were the systems? How are the pastoral communities viewing democracy? And it's there. The Maa community in Kenya, for example, they have these elder systems, and they have these age groups where different girls and boys and even women know their duties within the society. Let us blend that into our constitution. And then we can move forward and talk about human rights and tolerance and institutionalization and so on. Thank you.
Mary, if you don't mind me, I just wanted to just, Amondi said you cannot change a democratic, you cannot vote out a sitting president in Africa.
Unless there's a war.
No, I think that is not the entire case. It's happened. We've seen it happen in Nigeria. A party that had been in office for many years lost to the current party in Nigeria, and that is in 2015, when a sitting president lost an election and conceded defeat to another, to the opposition. So we've seen a case like that in Nigeria, of course, but it doesn't mean that is the case. So I understand what you're saying, but I'm just saying there are cracks in the wall that we are now which is what is giving us the impetus to even do what we're doing. So I just wanted to point that out. Go ahead.
I thought he was talking about as he's in the seat, as opposed to the next election. So, a president is doing the wrong thing within his term or her term of 5 years. It's very difficult to unseat them within that. Although there may well be impeachment. There may be impeachment.
Let me just elaborate a little bit. Let me just elaborate a little bit. And I'll give you example. Let me just elaborate a little bit. Take an example of Teodoro Obiang, Equatorial Guinea, the longest serving president. You want to remove Teodoro Obiang from power through a democracy. Will you do it? Yeah. Or you want to remove Teodoro, you find that Teodoro Obiang is corrupt. You want to have an affirmative action so that he can be removed from power. It's close to impossible. You cannot remove President William Ruto from power. What I'm saying, if you look at political theory and especially focus on the African continent, and here I'm talking about the political theory and its framing of African politics. It is very difficult to remove a sitting African president, not unless he is willing to leave or he's some. And a very good example is Gambia, the Gambia. No. The Gambian president was removed from power, Yahya Jammeh, and then he decided to stay, not unless ECOMOG tried to remove him from power.
Monday. So Monday. I mean, I honestly do not want this to be like a back and forth. I'm pointing out what has happened. Again, one of the things I have noticed, and I'm saying this to Femi, is theories are important because they direct us to existing practice and the possibilities of things that are repeating themselves or cementing themselves or becoming a norm. But this is what I have found. And I'm saying this because we're largely young people on this space. Look, there is always a crack in the wall.
Yes.
The reality is, when we changed the Nigerian constitution between 2016 and 2018, before the 2019 general elections, what we did was, before that time in Nigeria, for you to run for president, you needed to be 40 years. I think you had to be 45, but thereabout. And it's constitutional. Now, what it meant was that for a lot of young people between the age of 30 and between 30 and 40, you could not literally represent your constituency or your state or the country. You can't run for the highest position in the land. Mind you, the Gowons of those world, the Abdul Salams of those world, the Obasanjos of those world, the guys who fought for independence, so to speak, some of them got into leadership at the age of 30, 28, 35. But now they've written a constitution that has barred young people from participating. And why? Because they don't believe that young people can do anything better. What did we do? We said there is a crack in the wall. We know what our reality and history has been. We're not oblivious of it. We know we were dealing with a country, with a continent that has a reputation of not yielding, of not budging, of almost impossibility. But what we did was to bring a childlike mentality that says, despite what you see, the crack in the wall is what brings change. Monday, we carried out a revolution in Nigeria without firing a bullet. We changed the Nigeria constitution. It wasn't easy. We did it for about 3-4 years. But we went into the next election, and the Not Too Young to Run bill, which is celebrated globally today, was passed by the House, was signed into law, and guess what? We solved the problem of making sure that even the youth leader of the political parties, which was something that A 50-year-old could be a youth leader in a political party before in Nigeria. We changed it and said, moving forward, not just saying we need 30-year-old or the 5-year-old to run for president. We also want to ensure that your next youth leaders must be between the ages of 25 to 35. Now we have achieved that. Again, let me tell you another thing that happened. Recently, we discovered that our electoral laws were bad and that the 2010 Electoral Act that we're using to conduct our elections were terrible. Guess what we said? We came together and said, now that we've seen the crack in the wall, what is the crack in the wall? The crack in the wall is community organizing, which you have spoken to a lot, which is doing things differently, believing even against the odds. What we said to ourselves was that between 2020 and 2023, right? Between 2019 and 2023, which is a 4-year window before the next election, we are going to give Nigeria a new electoral act. Mundi, I am not telling, look, I'm not telling you guys, I need to put my video on so that you guys can see my face. I am not telling you what they did. I'm telling you, we came together from across the 36 states of Nigeria, met in the capital, and said, what is the mountain before us? How do we pull it down? And we said, right here, 37 of us, leveraging our media partnership, leveraging our story of the success we had with passing the Not Too Young to Run bill and making it a law in Nigeria. We are going to take on the system, irrespective of whatever happens. But before the 2023 general elections, we will deliver a new electoral act for Nigeria. Mundi, Femi, Yvonne, and the rest of us, on this call. It was not easy. COVID came. Sorry, Mundi. COVID came.
If you allow me, and Mary.
I think we've been listening. Can we add something, please?
I have a contribution here.
Sorry,
yeah,
Mundi,
and I've been waiting too.
As the moderator, I think let me allow people to speak. God bless.
Thank you.
Thank you for the contribution, because what you've shared with us is that what Omondi was trying to say is that change can actually happen. It's a process, and what Nigeria did is an exception to the norm. So it can actually happen. And I'm very cognizant of the time. So I do want to hear people's contributions and their thoughts. Okay.
Please,
and,
please. Yeah.
Dr. Kabwila has a contribution to this. Her hand is
yes. Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to underline that it's very possible to unseat a sitting government. Let's be very clear with that. Malawi did it. We had a government that was in place and we actually booted it out whilst it was there. So please, this thing of thinking we can't do this is what's killing us. We can and we have. South Africa has shown its moments. Now today, people never thought Kamuzubanda would go. And he was a dictator. He went. And one thing that I'll tell you, all these movements had the youth at the center. They were not being paid by anybody, but they took control and said, this is going to be done. I want to emphasize that for me, what keeps me in this is that our liberation is not going to be taught by the West. Agency is here. We Africans have it and have shown it. However, change is a process. When other people are trying and not making it, it doesn't mean it can't be done. Uhuru will come today, Uhuru might come tomorrow, depending on the dynamics. If I want to underline here, please, we need to be very careful to look at Senegal. Just yesterday, I think we saw Senegal bring a leader who came straight from prison, went and took power. All right. Now, for me, honestly, I get very worried if we look at how high the mountain is and then believe we can't even climb it. Yes, we can. In fact, we are doing this because the whole of this conference is to bring out how do we bring down this mountain. And part of the things that have made this mountain to be this big is that we've been convinced that once people do this, it's gonna whatever. The second comment I want to make is, let's not glorify our African past either. This business of us, I'm saying, where I get very worried when we say we want to take systems that respect elders, because I'll tell you, it's that thinking of elders that has silenced the youth, right? And when we say we want to take our African way of thinking, we want to take what is good and what will enhance youth agency, women's agency, and inclusivity.
And
one thing that has not allowed women to speak is this clan mentality. I'll stop there. Sorry. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Just one contribution to that. And I don't think there's much disagreement, actually. I think it's about the emphasis that people are placing on particular parts of what they are saying. That's for how I'm hearing it anyway. I think from what I understood of Monday is absolutely, it's a process, that there are difficulties. But you see, I think God bless and Jesse, both of you, I am hearing that what is being brought down is a structure that's not ours. And I think that's it. That is the game. And that's why I refer to, I've just taken down my roof and bit by bit is being placed back on top. We've got a new underlayment and now there's a roof back on. But what is it that you're going to build up again? And I don't necessarily agree, Jesse, that it is a question of throwing the baby out with the bathwater. There's lots of what is positive about our reliance upon, not absolute reliance upon, of wisdom. It's not just that you are an elder that gives you placement. It's your wisdom. It comes with a quality. If you don't have it, then you don't take that seat. And that is, again, is a part of a democratic system. So those who are able to, then you come forward and by and large, and I'm not saying that this hasn't been abused because we know it has been. And remember that, you know, a lot of the position of our matriarchies, we must acknowledge that that is part of African tradition. It's not a patriarchal system. Mm-hmm. To the contrary, and we must understand the role that colonialism had and what has, like you've just said, there are so many of our languages that do not have gender in them. Yeah. We've had queens, we've had powerful military leaders in our cultures. So this idea that it is, you know, what has become, and remember when systems are distorted and molded, oftentimes deliberately, to divide and rule. And so, you know, people are clever. They're strategists. It's just like, you know, you go to war. There are people who are planning which battle, which strategy to use. So when you're coming to conquer a place and have it in servitude for 1,000 years, that is not a small bit of planning. And I think we have to accept this. And therefore, what is our antidote? And we do have to go back and we have to retrace and start to now bring in some of what's modern in the, I hate that word, modernity. Modernity, that whole issue of, if you take like Western democracy, and I heard Hilary Beckles make this point so well, because sometimes, you know, when we fight against the West, we're also fighting against some of the stuff that we are in that. Jacobinism, high tea revolution. There are Africans who are fighting the democratic, what we term Western democracy. Some of our blood is in that as well. Let's not forget that. So some of those ideals and ideas, they're not they're not owned by the West at all. Remember when these guys were writing constitutions in America, they were also holding slaves. So what we're talking about here, we're looking at the ideals and how do we now superimpose or ensure that our version, and let's face it, we are one world. So oftentimes that which is true, the real truth, if we can call it that, tends to converge across the globe. Let's get back to that center point, because at that central point, there's a lot of convergence in terms of tolerance, in terms of rights, in terms of, you say Ubuntuism, that's a naive way of thinking about things. Yes, to a degree, if, for example, there's a chink in the armor that at certain stage, now there's a shortage. So you're not going to be you're not thinking in the abundance mentality any longer. You're thinking about, scarcity and, I need to hoard resources. That's why there becomes a kind of skewed way of visionizing that ethic, that center point. But if you juxtapose it with what was in Europe and what has fueled Western modern democracies, it's I think, therefore I am. Think the key difference. I am because you are against I think, therefore I am. Which one would you prefer to build a polity up on? I know where I would stand. And I think that our African traditions are a base. I'm not saying that's the end story. We're now in the 21st century, but it's a baseline to build from and take that which is true and build on it. Just like you said, Jesse, there are flaws in that system. It was in the 14th century then, what we're talking about. It's 600 years later. But there are things there, like you go to Magna Carta and you can still see a strand in, the UK's constitutional democracy, however you wish to frame it. And you can see the lineage. So I'm just saying that there are aspects of our past that we can still draw upon, but we need to modernize. And one last point, and I think this is critical. We need systems that bind our leaders.
Yes, absolutely.
Bind our leaders. And what do I mean by that? And let me give you one last, very, very quickly. I was burying my mother a couple of years ago, and we were in a village back in Benin. And at that time, there was a local meeting regarding some misdemeanor between two families. And they wanted to swear on the Bible, Quran, and all that stuff. And they were very happy to swear on it and still say an untruth. The village chairman or chairperson, who was a very learned person, a doctorate and all the rest. So he was steeped in local tradition and he was educated and he traveled and all the rest, said, okay, we haven't got anywhere here. Now let's go to our law and custom and let us swear on our ancestors. There was a different result because that is what bound that individual. Our constitutions don't bind our leaders. There's nothing there that will make them fall on their sword. And as I said earlier, back in the day, and it has happened, by the way, in the annals of African history, some kings have had to commit suicide because of misdemeanors. So I'm not saying, obviously we can't go back to that system, but we need something that binds our leaders. And this constitutional framework is not it.
Thank you. Omondi, if I can just give Bernard a chance to share his contributions, and then I'll ask you to respond. Bernard Audio? Bernard, are you here with us? Okay, it seems it's the blood. Okay, Omondi, if you can kindly respond to the contributions.
I will make it very short. Actually, what I'm trying to explain here, and actually I love theory. I'm a theorist. I love political theory. And political theory explains to us how Africa is moving towards democratization. And this is what I'm trying to say. Look at the Kenyan constitution, one of the best systems when it comes to democratization in Africa. Look at the Ghanaian constitution, one of the best. I think Kenya and Ghana has almost the same political system, which is very good system. And then compare that with South Africa and Tanzania. South Africa and Tanzania has the best political party culture. In Tanzania, I am very sure I can bet all my dollars in this. Chama cha Mapinduzi will always win the election. You cannot tell me that Chadema will win tomorrow. We are dreaming if we say that. I'll take you to South Africa. Ramaphosa, if Ramaphosa decides to go and support Julius Malema's party and get out of ANC, I don't think he will win. I mean, what I'm trying to say is this. ANC in South Africa is a very strong political party, and they always win elections. It is not that Africa has not moved on. We have very good systems. And I give an example of the Kenyan political system, which is very good. And I'm telling you, I can bet my life, if you do some research in Kenya, 70% of Kenyans will tell you elections were stolen. Yet we have some of the best system in Kenya, including even ICT system. And now we are even moving towards AI, even more better system in terms of ICT. So what
Sorry,
what I'm trying to say is
I was also
what
Hi, sorry. Bernard, hi. You can give your contributions after Omondi, kindly.
Yes. What I'm trying to say here, and I'm pinning this to political theory in Africa, is that let us look at our political system. How many presidents have been removed from power while they are in power because there was some corruption, or just a very good example, the way Trump was removed Trump went for one term. How many presidents in Africa have been removed from that system? Political theory will tell us you can count them. Majority of African presidents have absolute power, yet we have democratic system. So what I'm trying to say, a strategy towards democratization in Kenya, let us look at our political culture. And by political culture, I'm not saying we throw away human rights. I'm not saying that we throw away human rights. We adapt the Western system, which is already with us, human rights. We must have women's rights, because we cannot say that half of the population is left behind. No, we have women's rights, we have youth rights, but the challenge we are having is that our youth are naive. So we need to educate our youth. This is civic education. It's very important in Africa. And for us to do that, while we are educating our youth, while we're educating our women, while we are bringing more African women to the presidency, and I challenge you to go and see, do you know how many African women we've had as presidents? Some of them have been just interim presidents. I challenge you, go and take a look. In terms of history, there have been 7, which is very interesting. So what I'm trying to say is that our political system or our political culture should adapt the African traditional system. We blend it with the democratic systems, which we borrowed from the West, and move forward. And the most important thing is political stability. Let us not talk about human rights. Let us not talk about tolerance or trust. If Somali is dominated by Al-Shabaab, it will not work. Thank you.
Thank you so much for the response. If I can have the last contribution, we're running out of time. Bernard, are you able to hear us?
Yeah, good evening. This side is kind of evening. From Uganda.
Okay.
Yeah, so what I was trying to say was just to back up from Omondi's point of view on issues of African politics. Now, if I'm narrowed down to East Africa and also to my country, Uganda, we have had for the last 40 years, we have one president. And then also, in the course of having that president, we have had 2 constitutional amendments. One was term limits, another one was age limits. And I think the majority of Africa knows, not even Africa, the whole globe knows that we as a youth in Uganda, in one or the other, we have been kind of oppressed in a way that even representation in the political ground has been limited. Because now you see, like our parliament here in Uganda, we only have like one representative of the youth. So now you find that it's very, very hard for our issues as the youth, women and men, girls and boys, to be heard in the highest area of policy making. Now, what I was thinking was like, at this point in time, what should we do as the youth in Uganda in terms of representation on our issues? Because now here in Uganda, we have too much of teenage pregnancies. We have too much of domestic violence. We have too much of unemployment. So what I was looking at was like, what should we do? Because now representation at the policy level is very, very difficult as of now. Because fine, we have the issues, but now at that highest level of policy making, we have issues. So I was suggesting that the next time that you have a webinar, you, the panelists, should come up with some ideas, we share and see how we can be there. Because in a way we are oppressed, and that is the truth. We're discussing democracy. Democracy, fine, we participate in democracy. We go for elections, we have election cards or things. But now what we elect are people who are old enough. They're old, they're not youth. Our issues, they are there, the bills are there in parliament, but now they're not represented. So now I was like, what should we do? Because now it's really very, very limited in a way that even when you try to protest, you can't really do much. And that has been my concern. I've been listening to the webinar for some good time, and I was like, what should be the solutions on how to counter most of issues to do with the youth, we as the youth. So that is it.
Mary, if you don't mind, I'd love to just say a couple of words, which are kind of related. I won't be long. Thank you, Bernard, and it's great because you kind of bring it down to just basic issues of what's happening on the ground, at least in your experience. And I think it's always good to, as much as we theorize it and bring ideas, what are practical steps? Let me put it this way, the problem that you identify, this isn't for you to, it's not to say, oh, just wait, don't worry, be patient. But it is very clear because of the demographics that it's going to change dramatically in the next 10, 20 years. Yeah, just the numbers. Yeah, there's just lots and lots of young people in Africa. Yeah. And those young people in the next 10, 15 years, yeah, you're going to be older, but you're going to be like 40s in the majority. That's still young. I've passed that age now. Yeah, that's still very young. So it's about preparing yourselves and staying true. Because, unfortunately, when people do taste power, sometimes it corrupts. Not for everybody, but it can do. So I think that's, stay firm. I'm going to talk about a technological issue because I think this is vitally important for our entire enterprise. And I put it as, as dramatically as that. And I'm even complaining at our call today. We're here, like I think on Monday said it, and we're on Zoom. We're on Zoom. We're talking of decolonization. We're talking about Africanization, and yet we're still having a conversation about Africa on this platform. It's being recorded. Where's that recording going? Which server? Do you know? Is it our server? Do we belong? If we can get that recording, look at all the strategic stuff we're talking about today. That is going to sit on somebody's server. And we know what AI can do now. We know that it will be crunched, it will be synthesized, and every kernel of intelligence will be sat in somebody else's system. So the youth of today, because this is your technology, start self-hosting. Start democratizing your data. Don't give it away. Don't think it's valueless. It cannot be valueless. That's why these companies are worth trillions of dollars. It might sound like scary, like how on earth can we do it? Trust me, it can be done. We are doing it. And if we can do it at my old age, okay, I've got a young team as well. Let that be the way in which we change the narrative, because that's going to be the bedrock of where you get your resources in the future. You know, Reddit just went for an IPO. They are just raising billions of dollars in the United States. And of course, that's a big issue, yeah, for them. But the subtext is Google are paying them $60 million a year to use their data to train their AI. That tells you the value of our data that we give away on a daily basis. So from the youth perspective, think hard on how you come together. Think hard on how you're sharing information. Find out self-hosted systems. And it might sound daunting, like we can't afford this stuff. Well, Mary will tell you we're doing it so you can join us, and we will give you tools to set up. We will give you the open source technology to deploy. You know, a school server can have an entire comparable system to Office 365. It's not going to be Office 365. It's going to be an open source technology. But therefore, that school's resources is going to be sat on their server. That's power. These are some of the things that we need to empower ourselves with at that kind of local level. It's within our grasp. And I tell you what, it's going to change so many stories, because those guys want that data. They want it. They're going to come for it anyway. And you'll now be in a bargaining situation. If you want to sell it, you don't want to. If you want to strategize with other people around your data collection and your, you know, it's a very different picture that we're moving towards. And I think this is really important message. And I sing and jump up about it every single conference I go to. So please, let all groups value your data, use it wisely.
Mary, I think I'm about to run off, but I'll just say my last piece. And
okay.
The Chinese proverb that says the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. When is the next best time? Right now, right? I was speaking on the leadership question on one of the biggest TV stations in Nigeria yesterday. And I said, whether we like it or not, we're joking if we're not taking education serious. And I can just zero in and say, Africa's problem is quality education, functional education, education that produces, not education that enable you to adopt or adapt, right? So if you're not building your servers, if you're not building your technologies, you're not in the chip making space, you're not building your satellites, you're not, so we're not at best, we're very good at adaptation. So I look at the tech solutions that we've built in our company at Ready to Lead Africa. We're all depending on the App Store, the Google Store, and what have you. So my solution to everybody on this call, whether you are a nonprofit activist, whether you are close to government, or whether you are, whatever you're doing, for me, the solution to Africa's problems is quality, effective education. And that would mean changing the way we design our schools from primary. In fact, kindergarten, primary, to secondary, to tertiary. What I'm saying, and I've been sharing it, is if you come to my country, you see how we build 6 blocks classroom. So you have primary 1, primary 2, primary 3, primary 4, primary 5. That's what lawmakers, government officials build today in 2024 and say we have built a school. The school does not have a library. It does not have a playground. It does not have functioning toilets. It does not have an ICT room to train the next generation of students. Now, every other thing is a palliative approach. It's a palliative move. The way to plant this tree that Femi is talking about, that Mary is talking about, that Mondi is talking about, the way to plant this tree is that today you and I begin to say no to building schools the way the colonial masters did. That is what the United States did, and they were able to break free. I was privileged to be in the homes of the founding fathers of America. And Thomas Jefferson said, and I quote, "Show me a people that want to be free and uneducated. It has never been, and it will never be. No matter how much oil, no matter how much human resources, no matter how much youth bulge we have on the continent, I have come to the conclusion, based off on data available to me, without an education that empowers us to build what we consume, to create what we use, to design our technology, we will perpetually remain slaves to those who have once led us, and they will continue to do so. If you think I'm lying, look towards the East. The Asians, they knew this as a given and decided to invest in quality education. The China of today is not, China of today didn't just happen. It was the 20 years planting of that tree. It is the reward of quality education, of science, of STEM, science, technology, what is it, engineering, mathematics, of that. That is Africa's escape. Anything else is palliative. And palliative, you are at the mercy of people. I like what Femi said. Look at us. We're having this conversation on Zoom. Built by who? So you don't even have secrecy. You don't have privacy. You don't have ownership. You know, we always say this in our community. The day Europe, Asia, America decide to withdraw all their technologies from Africa, the day they choose to do so today, if they do so today, the likelihood that we'll return to the state of nature is very high. Because what are the things that we can claim to have built and have control over? Show me one. I'm not talking about adaptation. I'm talking
we might
about
be happier.
We might be happier. I don't know, but you know, so at the end of the day, let's start planting the trees now. Let's start planting the trees. Today. So go back to your communities, go back to your House of Rep members, senators, because I'm working on that. I want to criminalize the building of 6+ classrooms as education facilities for our children. I am talking practical solutions. I want to make it a criminal offense. If you take taxpayers' monies and you build 6+ classrooms, no playground, no basketball court, no volleyball court, no football pitch, right? If you do that, it's a criminal offense against the state. You are a threat to my collective existence. You are a threat. You are making us an endangered species. So I'm working with House of Rep members now to see how we bring that to the fore and make it a criminal offense. That is what sensible human beings do. And that's what I'm asking us Africans to do. Thank you very much for having me, and God bless you all.
Thank you for your contribution. I would like to wind up and take Dr. Kabila's comments as the last one. This is your last takeaway for us before I close up the session.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. I know we all say that and then we end up taking 20 minutes. But anyway, I wanted to say, firstly, I think we need to celebrate the fact that we've come together. And I think I also wanted to speak to the member who was saying, look, we are in Uganda and these are the issues we're meeting. I also think from here can be born something that can now be specific to the different cases. Because I think one of the problems that the Zoom meetings have and conference approach has is being general. And quite honestly, I wanted to say to the brother, I hear him. Because you want to sit here and say, then what do we do? So I wanted to suggest, if it was possible, that let's now have a case study approach from this, where we stop this thing of thinking Africa is 54 countries make up Africa. It's not like that, We shouldn't lump ourselves. Yes, there are things we can take from the general, but I think what we are hearing from the members is that there are people who have real issues that they want to know that in our case, what do we do? And I think there's a lot of expertise here. Looking at what Omonti is saying, and God bless all of them, and Femi, my issue is simple. We have a resource here. Let's learn to use what we have. And for me, we could actually regroup with, divide our situations the way they are. and look at a case study and say, what would we do in this? Because I think you talk about movement building, you talk about how do we deal with the thing of building Zoom. These are things we can do on a work plan and actually regroup and do presentations and make real decisions. You know, protecting the people that are in danger, but at the same time, actually giving tangible where we linked our theory and practice. So I just wanted to say, firstly, I really hear what he's saying, and I think it's so important. It's a challenge to us to say, is this not just a talk show? Can we get real? And I think I also see very rich contributions. So my plea is to say to the organizers that let's celebrate the fact that you've brought a platform for this. Because I think often we beat ourselves up on what we're not doing well. Because I mean, I'll tell you, you talk about women leaders. America has not managed to have a woman leader to this day, right? You go to the European countries, they've not done it, right? At least in Africa, we actually can tell them that we've had Joyce Banda, we've had whoever, right? So for me, and that doesn't mean I'm saying we couldn't have had more and we have got enough. I'm not saying that. So if you notice, the panel we have here is so good for me. When the sparks started to fly, I knew we are thinkers, because that's what a good panel does. When you are in a panel that just says jump and everybody says how high, then you're wasting our time, right? Yeah, so to me, I think we have a good team here. Let's just sit down and now say, what's the way forward? And one of it would be actually having case studies that we're looking at, and we are being specific to a certain case, be it on women question, what are we going to do? On youth, how are we going to, and we come up with models. Because I think, Femi, when you're talking about systems, it's about now start talking about models. How do we get the youth there? How do we get youths to stand for presidency? How do we develop systems for leaders? And someone can come and present on that, and we publish and we actually contribute to the knowledge production. So that's what I wanted to end. And also just to thank everybody here, because it's been a long time for me to actually get into a space where people speak their mind. There's one thing that Western education does, you know. I'll give you a good example. A good number of women who are well educated, they go to a funeral, they can't cry. They actually can't cry in public. I don't know what it is about the education we get from the West that just kills your emotions. And even this elitism, we've learned it, that now on Zoom, we wait for structures, we wait for so-and-so to speak before we do. But in this team, I wanted to thank you. I felt alive. I felt I was amidst people who have got an ideology. And I think what we're trying to say is, how does our politics, our democracy actually make women and youth participation an ideological issue, a political question? Yeah, so just to thank the organizers and also the participants, it was brilliant. I think for me, it was a moment to exhale, because as someone who led the academic freedom struggle in Malawi, that brought down a government, I faced treason charges, I've been petrol bombed, I've been there. And let me tell you, we took him down. They left. And it was the job of the youth and women. So we're sitting here and being challenged to whether this can happen, I think is the best thing that has happened in a long time, because it has made me think. I've learned a lot from the panel. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Kabwela. I really have to end this discussion. I know there's a lot that we've learned, there's a lot that we've shared. I just want to say a big thank you to the organizers, to the Youth Cafe, and I also want to challenge the Youth Cafe for this conversation not to stop here. We cannot just come here so that we discuss. I want to challenge the Youth Cafe to let us know what the next steps will be to communicate with us, to also share spaces that we can be able to plug in. As I know the Youth Cafe has a presence on the continent, so it would be very interesting to also just continue this conversation with the panelists that we've had, have other speakers come in, share their experiences, and also how do we continue to build democracy, for us to know that we should not have a homogeneous approach. We should take away the Western narrative, change our shift. I've also learned so much. So from me, I just want to say thank you so much to the organizers. Thank you for also giving me the opportunity to moderate this.
I've stayed up there for the longest time. But look at this timing from Wisdom.
Hi, Sharon. Your mic is on. Yeah.
Don't you just love Zoom?
I know. So Thank you so much. I know there will be communication after this to let us know what the next steps are. So also thank you for putting the challenge to us. Thank you so much for your insights. And I want to wish you all a lovely evening, afternoon, morning from wherever you are. Asanteni in Swahili. Thank you so much. And we shall be in touch. We shall speak soon. Thank you so much.
And thank you,
Bye-bye.
moderators, for doing a fantastic job. Thank you so much.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening.
Thank you.
All.
Bye to everybody.
See you, Jesse. Let's be in touch.
Yes. Thank you so
Okay.
much.
Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Mondi. So you're on the cameras off. Greetings.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Take care.
Monty's off.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone.
God bless. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
All of you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank
See you, Mary.
Mary,
We'll
for
be in touch.
organizing.
Yes. Well done.
Thank you.